Go. Hi, welcome back to your guided notes for conflict management of the hospitality negotiations and sales class that's taking place this summer. So we are in the book Conflict Management. We are now going to be discussing the chapter of conflict. I'm sure everybody here has had some in their life. Welcome to my world. Living is sometimes got a lot of conflicts. So we're going to go to that next slide. Conflict, what is it? Where is it? Well, we're talking about page 34 of your textbook. And let's go ahead and address what is conflict. Well, it exists wherever and wherever there is an incompatibility of cognitions or emotions within individuals or between individuals. Oh my gosh. I'm a little professor here at Metro State, and I got to tell you something. Every once in a while, we have group work or projects. I know that one of the projects that we have in our events planning classes is called Event Catering Strategies class. We have these beautiful tablescapes, but let me tell you, there is some conflict over creativity. There is conflict over how people want things to look. There may be conflict between the entire team, one individual of a team with another member of the team. Oh my goodness. And what we really want to do is we kind of need to just take conflict and park it somewhere because conflict gets in the way of getting a job done. That's my opinion. So how does conflict and negotiations correlate? Well, uh, according to the textbook, in addition to being the antecedent to negotiation, in other words, conflict happening before there's a negotiation, conflict also happens after a negotiation. People get the job done and then they're just so upset with how it turned out. Well, I think we want to continue on page 40. We start to talk about a systems approach to conflict. That's where you start to boil it down and give yourself some steps so that you can sleep at night if you've got a conflict going on in your world. While it is necessary to master the field of blank, which is a system and a theory, you will increase your effectiveness by developing a system and approach. So there are ways, in other words, what are we talking about here? There are ways to approach problems, and sometimes we approach them very calmly, sometimes we say systematically. We approach it with facts. We approach it by laying out a plan, etc. That's just part of the strategizing. Next slide. Once again, we're managing, we're resolving, and we're avoiding conflict through negotiation. Page 46. Let me grab another drink of water here. Excuse me. Okay. Thank you for that. But, well, we manage it. Yeah, I wonder about that. Managing conflict. We do the managing for the purposes of being constructive. In other words, everybody has different ways of doing things. But if we can all come to an agreement that we need to do things a certain way or we need to do it for the purpose of, that's when we use conflict to maybe find where there are glitches in our system or there are people who might be sabotaging things. We take away that component and we're able to manage the conflict and be constructive. We need to resolve conflict, obviously. Conflict can be emotionally draining, and resolution makes us feel better. And the best course of action to resolve conflicts is when we take behaviors that could be seen as destructive and we try to remove those obstacles because unwanted results many times they stem from the conflict. I've had work situations where people sabotage work, or I've used resolution techniques that didn't work and only made me feel isolated and lonely. So, chapter 3, managing, resolving, and avoiding conflict, once again in our guided notes, avoiding. I think this is probably one of the easiest ones that we use when we're trying to deal with conflict. I know that it's one that I avoid people or I avoid a subject matter, but eventually we do have to deal with it. It's temporary, and sometimes it's the best choice. I mean, when I'm super angry, if I can just avoid that person or that situation, when my emotion is really high or my temper is kind of just on the verge of wanting to explode, I'm just better off to avoid it, back off for a little bit, find the best way to deal with my conflict by eventually coming to the person or dealing with the situation. Um, like I said, some people like this as a strategy just to so that we're more constructive. Like sometimes did you ever find yourself avoiding a person or maybe even a phone call, and in order so that you won't focus on your cell phone, you just focus in on what you're working on. And it's amazing. It's actually pretty constructive that way. So this portion of our guided notes is completed. I thought if you have additional comments, please feel free to send me an email. I am in Italy, so it'll be a little difficult, but I do get texts there too. So I try to answer them as soon as possible. Thanks for listening in on your guided notes for Chapter 3, Conflict.